Well, hello there guys, it's me Matthew, I'm back once again, and for today's video, I'm going to be doing a review on Thomas and Friends' Misty Island Rescue, and why it's actually a pretty decent movie. So, without any further ado, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to talk about with Misty Island Rescue are its characters in particular. Now, I'll explain a bit of the plot. The plot of this movie is about Thomas, who has a reward going to the mainland for saving Diesel, but while he goes to the mainland, he gets lowered onto a raft and then gets separated from the ship when the chain breaks. Then he ends up on Misty Island and meets the logging locos, and he wants them to try and help him get back home, while at the same time, I'm getting the Joby logs back to the island of Odo, so that way they can use them to build the rescue centre located on the island of Sodo as well. And at the same time, the fat controller, Percy, and all of Thomas's friends are trying to look for him when they find out he's gone missing and he didn't arrive on the mainland. So yeah, that's essentially what the plot is. So let's talk about the characters. So the first character we're going to talk about is Thomas in particular. Now, one thing in particular that many people have said about Thomas is that they feel like he's just too dumb in this movie, and that he simply is unlikable. Well, that's clearly... Now, yes, I understand... Now, yes, I can see why people would see that he would be unlikable. But do you guys not realise that that's the whole point of the movie? Because Thomas goes through a character arc in this movie.
But Thomas was too excited to listen.
A tunnel to Sodor? I know all about tunnels. It won't be dangerous. We'll use the tunnel. I make good decisions. That's...
But made another decision.
We'll push and we'll puff until we break through.
So, yeah, guys, that's clearly not the case here. Like, when people say that Thomas is unlikable because he made bad decisions and that he doesn't listen to the others, that's the whole point of the movie, because the whole point later on in the movie is when he realises that he was wrong, and he realises that he doesn't always make good decisions.
Scared. Thomas felt terrible.
This is all my fault. I thought I knew better than you. I thought I always made right decisions. But I don't. I made the worst decision of all. I'm sorry.
And not to mention as well how the moral of the movie is also meant to be this as well.
I made the worst decision of all. I'm sorry.
The logging locos were kind.
You can't always be right. All of the time.
That's right.
So yeah, that's essentially what the moral of the film is meant to be, guys. That's what it's trying to show, that you can't always be right all the time, depending on what you think is safe and what isn't safe. And that's something that happens a lot in life, is that people aren't always right about certain things. And sometimes we make mistakes when doing things that we thought were good intentions but turned out to be bad. This is something that many people in general have been through in real life as well. So the moral simply is that you can't always be right all the time. And that you're not always in the right for everything. Sometimes you're just in the wrong. That's the moral of what the movie tries to show. Something else I'd like to mention as well is how Thomas reacts as well throughout the movie, like how he reacts to this wood transportation track thing, whatever it's called, and also with the way on how he reacts to Old Wheezy as well when he throws the logs in the water, and then Thomas almost decides not to use him. Like, that's honestly kind of funny how he, decides not to use him. is him, and just seeing his action towards like old Wheezy is just honestly quite funny. Because to be honest, that honestly would have been me as well, Ella if I was Thomas. And the same thing also applies as well, L2, hee-haw as well, when Thomas uses him. Now, let's talk about the logging locos. Now, yes, a lot of people do say that they're annoying. Now, with Ferdinand, I can kind of get as to why people do think Ferdinand is annoying, especially since, well, his catchphrase is, "That's right," and he says that so many times. So, on one hand, yeah, I can understand why people have issues with them. But with Bash and Dash, though, I don't really get why people don't like them. Like, Bash and Dash, when you look at the two side by side, they kind of look like twin brothers, kind of like Bill and Ben, and Donald and Douglas. So I don't really get why people would have issues with the logging locals when Bill and Ben, them two characters are even worse than the logging locals for the fact they do a lot of things even worse than them. Like, remember that Series 7 episode where they simply disobeyed Fergus's rules when he's the wise old engine? Remember that episode from Series 6 where they outright insulted Salty because he's a diesel engine, despite the fact that Mavis works with them at the quarry? So yeah, Bill and Ben are way worse than than Bash and Dash. So yeah. Now look, I'm not trying to say that Bill and Ben are bad characters, because they're not bad actors though. I'm just trying to make a point that Bill and Ben are way worse than Bash and Dash. Because Bash and Dash, out of all the episodes they appeared in from series 14 to 16, they never once did anything as bad as Bill and Ben, okay? I figured I'd just mention that. Also, something else I'd like to mention as well is how the logging locals seem to be way smarter than Thomas in the movie. Like, they do try to warn Thomas with some of his decisions that he makes throughout the movie. Like, when he decides to use all of the oil on Hee-Haw, and when they tell him about the tunnel.
Thomas spotted an old machine. It was rusty and rattly.
What's this? It's Hee-Haw! It's a log loader machine! But it uses a lot of oil, which is why we don't use it.
That's right.
We'll use it.
The logging locos were worried. Thomas's boiler bubbled.
A tunnel? You didn't tell me there was a tunnel. That's because we don't use it. It's closed because it's dangerous.
That's right.
So, yeah, the logging locals do kind of have more sense and more of a brain and do have a lot of, like, fears for what's going to happen, because they do try to warn Thomas for what he does. So I don't get why people would have problems with them in the movie in particular when they do try to warn Thomas. Especially when he uses all of the oil on Hee-Haw and uses the tunnel. The logging locals show a lot of genuine concern. They think ahead, and they really are worried that they'll run out of oil. So they actually do show a lot of genuine concern when they run out of oil from the movie. Like, I seriously just don't get why people apparently would say that they're annoying just because they simply, for like something like that. Like, you want to know an example of other Thomas and Friends characters that are annoying? Like, Billy. Yeah, that orange little brat from that Series 11 episode who is so unlikable. What about that one-off brake van character from that Series 2 episode that bullied Donald and Douglas for no reason? What about Vinny from Thomas and Friends The Great Race, who bullied Philip for no reason? Hell, what about that brainhead idiot Junior from Thomas and the Magic Railroad, who clearly did not care about wasting all of that gold dust that Mr. Conductor told him to look after? So yeah, there are many many other Thomas and Friends characters that are way more unlikable than the logging locals, and way more other characters that are more unlikable and brain dead than the logging locals. Anyway, let's talk about the other characters. Let's talk about the Fat Controller, Ola. The things in particular that are probably the best parts of the film with the Fat Controller are the bits where he's like telling the engines what they need to do to try and find Thomas, and also the moment when he realises he's lost Thomas and he didn't arrive on the mainland.
The Fat Controller was about to go home. Then the telephone rang. I see. I understand. Goodbye. Work had stopped at the Sodor Search and Rescue Centre. The Fat Controller was on board, Captain. Harold hovered overhead.
I've been all over, sir. There's no sign of Thomas.
Percy gasped and wheezed with worry.
Look again, Harold. Captain, we have a job to do. We must find Thomas.
Captain was ready and raring to go.
Right away, sir. Full steam ahead!
And Captain pulled away from the harbour.
So yeah, those scenes in particular are honestly the best parts of the film. Like, especially that bit when he realises he's lost, when Thomas did not arrive on the mainland, and there's no narration, it's just silence, where he says, "I see. I understand. Goodbye." Like, that moment in particular is honestly fantastic. And also not to mention that bit as well of Captain pulling away from the shore there to take the Fat Controller all across the sea to try and find Thomas. And not to mention as well how not to mention as well the scenes in particular with the Fat Controller and Percy. In fact, let's talk about Percy now, shall we? He's probably one of the best characters in the movie, since he does show a lot of genuine concern in the movie. And his scenes in particular are quite heartwarming.
Percy watched. He was worried.
Are you sure you're safe on the raft? Safe as engines, Percy. The Fat Controller said I make good decisions. I'll be back soon. Remember, 3 puffs of steam and you'll find me.
Percy smiled bravely.
Goodbye, Thomas.
Fat Controller stood in front of his engines. He was serious.
Thomas is not at sea.
Oh, no.
Now we must search all over Sodor. I will need all engines to help.
At Brendan Docks, Percy stared sadly out to sea.
Can you see Thomas from up there, Cranky? Please.
Cranky creaked. He felt sorry for Percy.
There's still no sign of him.
So yeah, the scene, Percy is definitely the best character for the fact he is very sympathetic. I mean, hell, I would honestly be Percy as well. I would honestly feel that way as well if one of my friends went missing, or if one of my family members, or someone that I knew very closely, or someone I knew had actually went missing. So yeah, those scenes in particular are very heartwarming, and the music as well just really makes you feel what's happening. You get a good connection and a good feel for what's happening in the scene, and you really feel Percy's emotions. In fact, this scene is probably the best one.
Percy's wheels wobbled with worry. He puffed and he peeped.
Thomas! Where are you? Thomas!
So yeah, that scene in particular is honestly the best scene in the whole movie. Like, that scene of him just yelling, like, yeah, that's honestly just really, nice, especially with that music in the background by and like the score by Robert Hartshorn really hits home and really hits hard. Let's talk about another character for this movie, Salty. Salty is also another great character in the movie, especially with the way how he's used in the film, like how he tells Thomas, Percy, and Edward the story of Misty Island. And not to mention as well how there's also this nice moment as well with Edward, which is very in character for Edward.
Please, Salty, tell us some of your old stories of the sea while I wait to be loaded. I can tell you tales of Misty Island. Please. The Misty Island? I think I do. But it was a long, long time ago. Perhaps the mist lifted. Perhaps, Edward. Misty Island is a mystery. Some say there are strange engines that live there. They say that they huff and puff in very strange ways.
See the Fat Controller and Gordon. They didn't visit often. See the Fat Controller.
So yeah, that scene in particular with if Salty is honestly very accurate to him as a character, since, you know, Salty is known for telling a lot of tall tales of the sea. And that scene with Edward is also very in character for Edward, like I said before. Now, let's talk about Whiff. Now, Whiff, honestly, it's honestly a bit unusual seeing him have a main role in the movie, given how he was only introduced 3 years prior in Series 11. And he has quite a good role in the movie, which is honestly kind of shocking that he's gotten this kind of role, given how he was only just introduced, like I said, 3 years prior, before Misty Island came out in 2007 with Series 11. Also, this scene in particular with him and Gordon is actually quite funny, and Gordon's reaction is honestly just funny when he realises he has to work with Whiff.
Whiff was surprised to see the Fat Controller and Gordon. They didn't visit often.
Thomas is missing. I need you to work with Gordon. Gordon can heave and haul. You will hurry and scurry.
Whiff wheezed. Gordon gasped.
Oh, the indignity!
Who puffed and chuffed one more time, while Whiff and Percy rattled on down the line. Through the dark and the deep, they were never afraid.
We're coming.
King Percy.
So soon, you'll be saved.
So yeah, that scene in particular, with Gordon, when he meets Whiff, when he realizes he has to work with Whiff to try and find Thomas, almost like his reaction is honestly just really funny and very in character for him. And the role that Whiff had in this movie, that he knew about these old tunnels because they used to shunt garbage down there, is honestly quite interesting, given how he's an engine that, you know, or is a rubbish engine that, you know, collects rubbish and takes it to the dump. Very accurate, that is. Now, there is something else I should probably mention as well about Whiff and the tunnel, but I'll save that for a later part. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, I feel like something else I should also mention as well about this movie is the animation. The animation for this film, just like with Hero of the Reels and all of the other Nitrogen, Thomas and Friends movies, is that the animation is quite impressive for its time. Like this shot in particular of Thomas in the tunnel, and you can see like a rock there, and also a little twig of what looks like a tree branch or something. The lighting is also quite good as well. The facial expressions with the Fat Controller all are pretty good as well. The water as well for this film looks quite good, especially with that scene I showed earlier of Captain driving away from the search and rescue center, and when he yelled full steam ahead, like the whooshing water is honestly, like that bit in particular is quite nicely animated, with the water brushing aside as he goes speeding through the water. this shot in particular looks kind of cool, like that big dirt hill there that you can see. And also, not to mention other little details in the background, like those logs laying in the middle of the river, those bushes. So yeah, it looks quite good. This camera, and not to mention how there's also some unique camera shots, like this one right here, low at the ground when Thomas meets the logging locos. In fact, I don't think we've ever seen a camera angle shot like that before, or in not just the CGI series, but the entire franchise. Like, I don't think we've ever seen a one at this angle where there's 3 separate tracks, and each track has an engine on it. Like, that's honestly, I think, something that's probably new. And not to mention as well, these shots in particular, where you can see the bushes and trees in the background that look quite good. And not to mention other little details, like this shot in particular, where you can see Thomas on the calendar right there in the Fat Controller's office. And some other notable details, like on the right here, you can see the shadows of that bookcase thing. I think that's what it is. Well, actually, I think it's a paper study metal drawer opener. I hope I'm right there. I do apologise if I'm wrong. And also, not to mention the shadow of the curtains there. So yeah, this is really nicely animated. The hollow tree tunnel section is also quite good. It's beautifully lit up. The details on the log look so real. The little mushrooms look so good. Everything in particular in this movie is nicely animated, and the way how everything's designed really does fit in with the type of film that this is meant to be. It all works really well. Now, some of the things in particular I should probably talk about in particular are some of the voice actors. Now, the voices for Thomas, Percy, and Diesel, they're pretty much just as good as they were back in Hero of the Reels and also Series 13. So yeah, their voices are honestly just as good as what they were from Hero of the Reels and Series 13. In fact, Diesel's voice in particular for the UK dub is honestly really good. Like, that voice from Diesel is honestly just really good. Like, Carrie Shield is honestly a fantastic voice actor for the Thomas and Friends series, and that voice he does for Diesel is honestly so good. Like, he's way better. Like, he's honestly a lot better than Michael Brandon, who voiced Diesel in the US dub. So yeah, Diesel's voice, great voice. I also really liked Salty's voice as well, was also very good as well. Like, he sounded very much like a pirate as well. Cranky's voice in particular was also quite good as well. Now, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but that scene in particular with Cranky trying to look for Thomas when Percy asks him, that's honestly quite nice, that is, because Cranky is usually a character who, doesn't respect the engines, and that's a bit unusual for him to want to help, wanting to look out for Thomas. Another thing in particular I should mention is also a scene as well with Gordon, Odin, James, and Edward. Now, just like with Thomas, Percy, Gordon, Edward, and James's voice, their voices are just as good as what they were in Hero of the Reels and Series 13. The same thing also goes as well for the Fat Controller. They sound very much like the same characters they've always sounded like.
The mist is too thick.
We can't see to pop. How can we find Thomas?
So yeah, that's really heartwarming, and quite in character for Edward. And also the other characters as well. Now, another thing in particular I should probably mention is the narration. One thing in particular that does get annoying with this era of Thomas and Friends is the overuse of narration in particular, which is quite understandable. But I will say this though, the narration for this movie is actually quite good. Michael Brandon is fine, I guess, as the narrator, but Michael Angelis is honestly quite good in this movie. Now, one problem in particular with Michael Angelis from series 14 to 16 of the CGI series is that a lot of his narration just sounds very much the same. But his narration, because the problem with his narration from series 14 to 16 is that it just sounds so repetitive, and he generally just sounds like an old grandpa who's not really trying that much to put in a lot of effort. But his narration for this movie is actually quite good. Good.
And then the last coupling snapped.
The last flatbed of Joby Wood sank from sight below the waves.
Like, that's honestly quite good, his narration there. And also his narration for the scene where Thomas ends up on Misty Island is also pretty good as well. And not to mention the sound effect as well for that scene is also just spot on as well. Like that sound of the log falling down, bashing into the rocks and then falling into the sea. Like, the way how it sounds as well, it just sounds so good. So yeah, that's honestly really good. But that is. Now, let's talk about some other aspects. Let's talk about the music and songs. It's definitely no question that the music and songs for this movie are amazing. Like, the opening theme is honestly amazing for the fact it sounds... In fact, the opening theme song of this movie sounds very similar to Pirates of the Caribbean. So yeah, that sounds very similar to Pirates of the Caribbean, and I just love that opening theme song. That's what it gives me. It gives me Pirates of the Caribbean vibes. And also, not to mention, the ending song is pretty catchy.
Misty Island Rescue, here we go.
So yeah. Now, even though the song doesn't sound that much like a Thomas song, and it does sound a bit American, it is still quite catchy. Actually. Now, the last two things I would like to mention are this, is that at the scene of where Thomas lands on the island, like I mentioned before, that scene in particular is really heartwarming, and the narration from Michael Angelis is also really good as well.
It was very, very misty and very, very quiet. Thomas could only see trees and hills. He tooted his whistle, but there was no answer.
Like, that's honestly amazing, that scene. The narration from Michael Angelis, the look of Misty Island, looking like a mysterious place Thomas has never been to before. Or, like, that's honestly amazing, isn't? And the sound and the score as well in the background is just amazing. And who can not forget the post-credits scene as well for this movie?
You'll be laughing on the other side of your boilers soon, silly steamers.
Yeah, that scene in particular is honestly, no question, amazing. Although, it's honestly quite sad that because, like, that's meant to be a little teaser trailer for the next Thomas and Friends film, Dear the Diesels. Although, too bad that movie that came out a year later turned out to be very disappointing. But, whatever. Now, even though I did state I thought this film was a pretty decent movie, there are some other aspects in particular I should probably talk about as well. Some other problems as well with this movie. For one, like some aspects in particular that are not that good. So this is more of a negative. So let's talk about some of the negative things about this movie now. The first thing in particular is this subplot with Diesel wanting the Joby logs and wanting to be a really useful engine. Like, this generally doesn't add anything to the film, and it's just quite a bit of a pointless scene. Like, they really, like, could they seriously not come up with another better reason for Thomas to go to the mainland other than just rescuing Diesel? Now, maybe if they changed this whole scene and perhaps they changed it to Diesel, let's say, delivering like a bunch of trucks and then he nearly fell off a bridge and Thomas saved him or something like that. Instead of having Diesel shunting the Joby logs to the search and rescue center and then them falling into the sea. Maybe they could have done something like that, because then this pointless subplot wouldn't be in the movie. So, yeah. Another thing in particular that is a bit annoying as well about this movie, that one thing that is a bit annoying about the movie is the amount of rhyming. Now, it doesn't get me as annoyed compared to some other... It's not as annoying to me as other people, but it can get a little bit annoying sometimes. I'm a bit repetitive in some areas, but yeah. And also, not to mention as well, how there's this shot in particular where we see all these Joby logs on the ship, right? And yet, on the island of Sodor, they only load 3 of them onto a they only load 9 of them onto 3 separate flatbeds. So yeah, only 9 the island of Sodor only managed to get 9 out of the several Joby logs that are on that ship. Now, with that bit seen right there, I feel like you could argue that perhaps maybe the ship was dropping, like, 3 loads of Joby logs to, like, separate islands, so maybe that's the reason why. I guess you could just argue that. Maybe that's what happened. And also, not to mention as well, another problem as well with this movie is how Misty Island is. Now, how on earth has no one not seen that island there before, especially with how big it is? Like, wouldn't it have made more sense if Misty Island was located on a certain part of the island of Sodor, like a part of the island that no one has explored for years, like it's located at a certain angle of the island of Sodor that no one has been to before. You know what I mean? That way no one would have noticed the island. Or perhaps, why not just make Misty Island smaller and not that big? You know what I mean? Like, why not something like that? And another thing in particular I should mention is Whiff, how he somehow knows about the tunnels, and it's said that he's one of the oldest engines on Sodor after Hero and Edward. But how exactly can that make sense when he was introduced back in Series 11? Now, something in particular I should mention is that many Thomas and Friends fans have said that the model series and the CGI series are 2 separate canons. So I feel like with this, you could just hand wave that and just accept this as the CGI series timeline. That Whiff is like one of the very few first engines on the island of Sodor after Edward and Hero. I guess you could just argue that for the CGI series canon. So I feel like we can let that slide by. But if they were the same canon though, well then there's no way that this can work. So yeah. Now, something else in particular I should probably mention is the fact that the Fat Controller goes to the island of Sodor with Gordon, Edward, and James. Like, this scene in particular just kind of is redundant. Like, why would you take them to the island when you already had Percy and Whiff going there through the tunnel? I know. Like, I can kind of understand as to where the Fat Controller would be coming from. Like, he would want to do this because, you know, Thomas is on Misty Island, an island full of mist, and it would be tricky to find him. So I feel like having a bunch of engines go with you to there is a good way to try and find him a lot easier. But even then, though, it's quite easy for them to get lost as well. Just saying. And not to mention as well how they don't even show how they got off the ship either, which is quite questionable, how they never showed or established how they got off the ship, but whatever. And another aspect as well I should talk about is the fact that the logging locos' backstory as well, because they state that they were too naughty for the mainland, which is why they sent them here. So why would they just send them to this island then? And also, what exactly did they do that were bad on the mainland? Especially in this movie, because all we do is just see them loading logs, and just playing on Misty Island. Now, I don't think that's exactly what they do. I feel like they do actually have a job on the mainland. I think their job is to load logs, while at the same time just having fun. And I'm guessing perhaps maybe ships come in every now and again from the mainland and load logs, and the logging locals load logs onto the ships. And I'm guessing that it's a secret island that only the mainland knows about. I guess you could argue, I mean, that's what I honestly think, especially since, well, that's what the logging locals do all the time. And hell, they do that as well in series 14 to 16. So, yeah. And, yeah, that's about it. That's it for pretty much all of the negative things. I feel like the wood being on the ship and the island, and only 3 flatbeds of logs, and you know, 3 loads of logs getting lowered onto 3 separate flatbeds, and also Whiff knowing about the tunnels because he's the oldest engine. I feel like with those 2, you could just brush those off to the side, right? Because like I mentioned before, you could just argue that the CGI series is a different canon, and that ship was transporting 3 separate loads of logs to all different islands. So I guess you could just argue that for that scene in particular that you see near the beginning of the movie. I guess you could just argue that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for all the negative things. So, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me talking about why I think Misty Island Rescue is actually pretty decent. The movie has quite a good moral. Quite a lot of the characters are quite good. Percy, the fat controller, Salty, Edward in particular. Whiff had quite a big role as well in the movie. The silent moment scenes are really appreciated, especially that scene when the fat controller picks up the telephone. The animation looks amazing. The theme song for the movie is great. The music is great as well. The ending post-credit scene is great. The voice acting and narration is also really great. And not to mention as well how the first half of the movie is probably the best part of the movie in terms of how it sets up certain parts of the movie, like how they established the search and rescue center near the beginning of the movie. And some other all of the scenes with the fat controller and Percy and all the engines looking for Thomas on the island of Sodor are really heartwarming. And the scenes of Thomas trying to learn on how to work on Misty Island, on how to get back to Sodor, those scenes in particular are quite good. How he has to figure out problems. So yeah, those scenes are quite enjoyable. Although there are some aspects that could have been improved, like the diesel subplot could have been removed, Misty Island could have been placed in a different area. They could have really toned down on the writing. Having so much rhyming in it. They could have changed up the rescue scene, like perhaps the fat controller goes to that Misty Island and finds out Thomas is trapped inside the tunnel, so he sends Whiff and Percy to go through the tunnel and also then come and rescue Thomas out. They could have done something like that. But as it stands, though, it's pretty decent. This movie for what it is. Like I said, its story could have been better, but at least it has a great moral and some pretty good characters, some great voice acting, great animation, fantastic music and songs, some really sad and emotional scenes with Percy the Fat Controller, and all of the other engines. The scene of Thomas exploring Misty Island, the scene of Edward, James and Gordon exploring Misty Island. So yeah, there are some good aspects about this movie for what it is. Well, anyway, that's it for this video. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.